Let me bring on another great guest. We've had a great show today. Ray McGovern. How you doing, Ray? You doing okay this morning?
We're doing fine so far.
What is it so far? It will go well. I promise you. There's no chaos in the
So
next
far,
30
so
minutes.
good. Good to
Yeah.
be with
Ray
you.
McGovern. He's an American political analyst, former CIA agent officer. McGovern or Ray McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990, and in 1980s chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in preparing the president's daily briefing. That is amazing. You've had a remarkable career in this, so I'm deeply appreciative that you're joining me on this. Um, I guess we have to start at the deal, the Gaza deal that has recently taken place. Donald Trump has been running around taking credit for it. He made the point of saying Netanyahu is super popular now. I don't know why Trump thinks that, but whatever. How do you trust Trump in this or Netanyahu in this? I mean, one guy was running a genocide, the other guy was paying for the genocide. And
Mhm.
up to this point, every time, let's be very clear, Hamas was willing to accept this deal back in 2022. This is basically the same deal, with the difference being Israel is allowed to keep its troops in for some kind of indeterminate amount of time. Everything, even during the Biden administration, anytime something happened, it was clearly Israel. And the Biden administration and the Trump administration, Wickoff himself, would turn around and say that damn Hamas keeps ruining the deal when it was clearly Israel. Do you trust this deal? Do you think there's something different about this deal as opposed to the other ones that have taken place?
Well, Jamal, I see that you've done your homework again. You've prepared my answer very easily. The answer is no, I don't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Yeah.
Will the Israelis adhere to phase two and the rest of the commitments they ostensibly made? I'm from Missouri. To show me straight, okay? You have to show me. I mean, this happened again. I mean, it happened before. I mean, this earlier this year, this happened, and people were saying, "Oh, now that Trump has put his signature on it, oh, Netanyahu would never welch on that deal." Well, we saw what happened, didn't we? Okay, so I think this gives a temporary boost to Trump at a time when he's in real trouble. It's going to be temporary. So far, well, the ceasefire just went into effect at 5 o'clock this morning, our time.
Yeah.
So far, so good, but that's just ours. One probably troublesome indicator is that this fellow Marwan Barghouti, who is hands down the best candidate for the presidency of Palestine.
Yes.
He was on the list that Witkoff signed. Oh, he's not on the list that Netanyahu approved. My God, you know. Is Witkoff going to let him get away with this just to give Trump a temporary boost and give him a chance at the next Nobel Prize? Give me a break, man. So, no, you can't trust these people. I don't think that it'll be very long before those trucks laden with food and other medical supplies are continually limited in how they satisfy the hunger, the forced starvation of the Gazans. And I rejoice with them that for a couple hours now, at least, there's been nobody's tried to kill the Palestinians with bombs or missiles, but
Right.
they're still going to try to kill them with forced starvation. I'm Irish. That happened to my great grandparents. Okay, I know what forced starvation means. Okay, and that's what they're doing. So no, I wouldn't trust them as far as I can throw them. And again, it's kind of hard to be so skeptical given the fact that many people are rejoicing. And my God, you know,
Yes.
well, here's a little thing, Jamal. Just a couple hours after the deal was signed, but before it went into effect, Israeli tanks opened fire on people lining up to go home. Now, what does that tell you about the Israelis? So they're pariahs. They're pariahs for a reason. I think the collective UN people need to unite for peace and send those Indonesians and other people who volunteer to end this genocide. Send them in. That's a big hurdle, but that's what we got to do. Otherwise, the UN is not worth much at all.
Some people are making this argument that because Donald Trump has been so vocal, or at the very least his face is so prevalent on it, that this makes a difference. But you don't buy that. You, from your point of view,
Jamal, could you
it doesn't
speak a
matter
little
one way
louder,
or
or could you speak closer to the mic?
oh,
My
sure. I'm sorry.
earbuds seem not to be working so well
No,
today.
no, no.
Could
You're
you say
perfectly
that
fine.
again?
Let me turn this up. Some people are thinking that because Donald Trump, his face is on it, that he's been so prevalent in regards to, I got a deal, this is what I was able to do, et cetera, that he's more inclined. And there's a secondary part to this also, that Israel's exhausted, meaning the number of troops that have died, for example, in Israel, the number of that have been committing suicide, that Israel wasn't able to accomplish its objectives militarily. And this is their, let's say, their way out. This is their back channel of trying to pull back to rest their forces. Do you see it that way? How do you view it in this case? That, and I know I'm asking two questions, but they're kind of related to one another. That part of the reason and rationale for this is that A, Israel is exhausted, and B, all things being equal, they needed a way out. And this was their out, kind of, in a sense, at the very least temporarily.
Well, time will tell. That's the optimistic projection. Yes, they haven't beaten Hamas. Whether Hamas will be flexible enough to abide by its share of the provisions, including disarming, if I were a Hamas person, I'd have second thoughts about that. I mean, it's not a matter of trust, it's a matter of experience, for God's sake. One thing I would note, Jamal, that maybe your listeners don't advert to, but there is international law, and under international law, occupiers have no rights. Okay, they don't have any rights when people try to throw them off. So we have the Chinese representative, a big lawyer at the UN, saying, "Look, what happened on October 7th, 2 years ago, was justified under international law. The occupier has no right to suppress the occupied, and the occupied has every right, including violent struggle, to retaliate for oppression." My
That's right.
God, well, that is the law. And those occupied territories were occupied in 1967, okay, on the pretext that Egypt was going to attack Israel. Now, the Israeli former prime minister, Menachem Begin, in 82, in a fit of chutzpah, at a meeting in Washington, said, "Look, let's be honest here. The Egyptians weren't going to attack us. We decided to attack them. Huh? That's what happened. That's the way it went down." Huh? And the New York Times goes, "Oh, well, isn't that interesting?" Well, as a result of that, the Israelis occupied all these territories. And now they're taking it on the chin by people who realize that they have a right to throw off this oppression, this occupation, by armed struggle. So I'm sort of a nonviolent type, but when you look at international law, it's justified, and it takes the Chinese representative to the UN to point that out.
Yeah, you have a right to defend yourself if you're being occupied. Agreed. Some other people make the argument that Israel needed to settle this issue down in order to go after Iran. That the whole issue of the Abraham Accords has apparently put Iran further up on that list of things to pacify. That this is kind of like an American plan in a sense, where it's like, okay, we've hobbled Hamas, we've hobbled Hezbollah. Iran is the big issue now that we need to effectively settle and deal with in the region, and that we needed this to be calm before going after Iran and with the pursuit of the U.S. Now, pursuant to that, this came out the other day. TASS is reporting, and I'll flip to it just so you can see it. This and this. All right. TASS is reporting, according to Russian TASS, who quoted Putin, Israel conveyed a message to Iran via Putin that it does not seek a conflict and would rather prefer to, quote, resolve issues. Additionally, according to Israeli newspaper, Zionist entity is afraid that Iran will carry out preemptive strikes against them. Quote, in my opinion, these statements have no pillars to carry any certainty. If anything, 2024, 2025 has taught us to be vigilant at all times. Give me your take on that, that a secret message was spirited to Putin by Israel saying, hey, we have no issue. We don't want to attack Iran. We just want to resolve these issues amicably. Give me your take on that. Apparently that was coming from TASS.
Well, many of my contemporaries, my colleagues, have been expressing themselves as being convinced that it's just a matter of weeks or so before
Yes.
the Israelis will attack Iran again, and that the U.S., in person of Trump, will support it just as they did back in whenever it was, June or so. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Now, there are problems with that. And I feel a little bit at a disadvantage because lots of people know more about Iran and Israel than I do, but it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, last time the Israelis took it on the chin. Nobody notices this, but the Iranian, after they recovered from the surprise attack, right? Surprise attack, sort of like Pearl Harbor. When they recovered, they retaliated and they wreaked havoc on some of the key installations in Israel. And they
Hmm.
can do that again. They even held back some of their more sophisticated missiles. So, uh, are the Israelis going to commit suicide by trying to what to? It's not going to be regime change. There's going to be more assassinations and stuff. Are they really going to do it? I don't know. And when you look at Iran now, it's part of BRICS. I
Hmm.
mean, the Russians and the Chinese are very serious. The Russians sent a great big aircraft, the biggest ones they have, transport aircraft of all kinds of weaponry. Just this a couple of days ago, the Russians have made clear. Look, we want to make sure that Iran knows that they're not alone in this thing. That's new. The Russians have an interest in this. You're damn straight they do. I mean,
Yeah.
they're soft underbelly. That Iran has always been a really, really a tough thing for them to handle. So, Chinese, of course, depend on Iranian oil for about 20% of their oil consumption, I think. So these big powers are now involved, and they're talking to Netanyahu. And I think they're reassuring them that not reassuring, but telling Netanyahu, look, the Iranians developed their own hypersonic missiles of the kind that the U.S. doesn't even have. You saw what happened last time. You want that to happen again? Besides, we have these two big brothers here, China and Russia. So my guess, in all logic, is that it's not going to happen. But who knows? McGovern's been wrong before.
um, okay, fair enough. Why do you think that people think it's going to take place? I mean, I have a rationale for why I think it's going to take place because it feels like a playbook. Like, get the European Union to put snapback sanctions, and then the U.S. and Israel can turn around and say, "Well, hey, they're pulling out of the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, or they're kicking out the IAEA, which they should, by the way, and use that as a pretext to go after them."
Yeah.
But but as you point out, they took a beating that last time around, and so maybe you're right. I don't know. I suppose we will see. I mean, because a lot of people think that this is imminent at this point.
Well, again, that's what most people think. Or, well, I talked with Scott Ritter yesterday. He no longer is convinced that it's inevitable, where most people are saying.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of what incentive Netanyahu would have to do this. And again, it really all depends on if Trump gives him to believe that Trump will support him. Now, last time around, yeah, there's evidence that Trump reassured this guy that, yeah, you started off and we'll finish it. But the interesting way that it finished was that when the Israelis are taking it on the chin with hypersonic missiles raining down on them, and inside Israel, they said to Big Daddy, "Hey, Daddy Trump, please come, please get a ceasefire right away," and he did. Okay, so I mean, there's an object lesson of what happens. I've often said here, the Iranians have a deterrent now.
Hmm.
It's not a nuclear weapon. They don't need a nuclear weapon, and they are not working on a nuclear weapon. They haven't been at least since 2003. Okay, we would know about it, even absent the IAEA, and there's some question as to whether they go back into those sites. So, let me just see if I still have this little book here. Oh yeah, yeah. You remember this appearance of Netanyahu at the
I do.
UN, right? Okay,
I
so we
do.
got
Part two was strong.
90%. Oh, man, look at that red line there. Okay, now what does that have to do with? That has to do with enrichment, not a weapon, okay?
Yeah.
Now, enrichment is separate and distinct from carving out a nuclear weapon. And the conflation of these two things, where Netanyahu has for years been doing, oh, look at that enrichment, they're almost there. Well, until we see two things, some evidence that they are working on a nuclear weapon, and some evidence that the religious edict, it's called a fatwa, okay? Muslims take this very, very seriously. That was introduced by the Supreme Leader 2003. They stopped if they had a program at all, okay? And they'd have to reverse that fatwa. It would have to be public. They would have to have debate in the parliament, and the Supreme Leader and the high national security people would say, okay, forget about it. We have a new fatwa. It says go ahead and develop a nuclear weapon. None of that's going to happen. Why? Because they don't need it. They don't need it. They have enough retaliatory capability now with all these hypersonic missiles and everything else to do Israel in. And that's why I'm reluctant to think that Netanyahu, even if he's aided and abetted by Trump, will go off and try to do the same thing he did in early spring or late spring, summer.
Speaking of Netanyahu, there's an argument that was often made that part of the reason that Netanyahu was continuing the war because he needed the war. That if it wasn't for the war, he would effectively have been thrown out on his ear at this point. Does this kind of ceasefire, what does it mean for his political stability in Israel, especially since there's a large coalition of people that hate the fact that he even agreed to this deal in the first place? Is this political situation in Israel stable or unstable at this point, given this kind of quote unquote ceasefire?
It's stable as long as he has these extreme right wingers together with him. It's not only a political problem for him, it's a personal problem. If he ceases being prime minister, he goes to jail. There are 3 court cases pending, pretty much not a knockdown case where corruption of one kind or another. He and his wife, they had a bridal suite, as I imagine it, in some prison, and they're ready to put him in there as soon as he's out of office. So, here's a guy that has this deep personal stake in this, right? So now when you're thinking about how that motivates him, well, could a person, just to try to avoid prison, do genocide? Forced starvation? Well, he's doing it. Okay.
Yeah.
Would a person like that shy away from trying to use a mini nuke if in extremis against the Iranians? Well, I wouldn't put it past him. I mean, the guy is, well, he's predictably bad. So I have to look at the worst case here and figure out, well, is there any chance at all that Trump, now that he's riding high on the ceasefire, at least for the last few hours, whether he'll see fit to restrain Netanyahu, if only because the Russians and the Chinese saying, look, this time we're in with him. We're already giving him some really sophisticated air defense systems, and they have some of their own indigenously produced. So this time it's not going to be the same as the last time, and you want Israel to be destroyed? Do you want them in extremis to try to use a nuke? I don't think you want to do that. So to the degree there are a couple of people who are not arch Zionists within the Trump circle, I think that the reason may prevail, not because of any shrinking away from doing this kind of thing, but just of the practical consequences that one can now expect.
Yeah, but I'm asking this in the context of his own political futures. But your point is he's stable currently in the government, even if the ceasefire stays in play. He's not on his way out in this case.
Well, I don't think the ceasefire is the next stages are going to be implemented. I would be surprised. Last time they weren't. So if they're not, as I predict, then the hardliners are going to smile and say, oh, it didn't work this time either. Oh, that terrible, didn't work, So on the one hand, Hamas has shown incredible staying power, okay? That would mean to me that they're not going to disarm themselves. My God, why would they? On the other hand, you have Trump needing a temporary victory. Look, he's taken on the chin. The government shut down, for God's sake.
No.
Um, and the last thing I'll say, Jamal, is that as the teenagers used to say, Trump he's not okay, okay? He's not okay. I mean, you don't have to look at his UN speech. You don't have to look at his speech before those military people in Quantico. Look at the cabinet meeting yesterday. He opens it up and he goes on for 40 minutes. I counted them. I have to watch these things, right? About various and sundry, right? And it's just so discombobulated. And this time he's not talking off the cuff. He's reading, or somebody had somebody write this stuff down for him. And he's so, it had nothing to do with the main issues. It all had to do with the cabinet fawning and saying, Mr. Trump, you should have the Nobel Prize because look what you've done. You finally did a deal with the Israelis, and oh, it's going to be great. Okay, so that's what all of them did. It was embarrassing. It was so disgusting. Okay, everyone, Mr. Trump, this Rubio, oh, Mr. Trump. So it was fawning, and that's what he wanted. Okay, then he said, oh, well, maybe some of you like to have something to say. Yeah, the cabinet meeting is supposed to reports from the cabinet. Just a few. We don't have too much time. So, I mean, it was just very, very embarrassing. And I think that as the Russians and the Chinese look at Trump, they're saying, look, this guy is not okay. Number one, what the Russians do is look, let's not provoke them. Let's fit in with these people well, let's not, fawn over him, but let's talk. Oh, he's a great person to talk to. Putin, it felt like he's an easy person to talk to. And, we think he's sincere. We think he wants to do a deal on Ukraine and all this stuff. So what they're doing is bend over backwards to see if they can work with this situation where they have to flatter the guy, because there is a desire, in my view, deep down in Trump to settle Ukraine. He's got no real alternative. Putin is one. Putin is willing to give him enough lipstick to put on that pig of defeat, and it's just a matter of whether Trump can face down the right wingers in his own cabinet, the Zionists, and the people who really want to support the Europeans. The Europeans to do what?
The Russians have said
Tomahawk missiles. Tomahawk missiles? That's a canard. Yeah.
Sorry. No,
Sorry?
you're perfectly fine. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I agree with you, because my thought was always that he was always bluffing with the Tomahawk missiles. I mean, for me, it wasn't a real issue until it was a real issue. Like until you actually send those and you have arming them, etc. I didn't take it entirely as a fully real issue. But do you really think that the Russians are saying that I think the expression was the foundation has cracked to the core, and that the building would have to be rebuilt. Like they went very far, and saying that all momentum from Alaska has stopped. Trump is a weak leader who effectively takes the point of view of anybody who comes into the room last. I mean, give me your take on that. I mean, do you think there's any chance, especially with him talking about tomahawks? Because whether it's real or not, you are effectively saying we are going to fire missiles at Russia directly. Mm-hmm. Our hands doing it. That's what he's threatening in this case.
Yeah.
Give me a take on
all. We in veteran intelligence professionals for sanity compare notes. We give each other sanity checks. That's one reason we added sanity to our name. Yeah. And talking with Scott Ritter on all this stuff, we finally concluded very easily that there ain't no Tomahawk missiles they give to Ukraine, even through Western or even through European leaders, which is the channel that's got to be used now according to U.S. policy. There aren't any. They were all dismantled to enable the Nuclear Forces Treaty to prevail back there in 1987. Now, could they build some? Yeah, of course. Or could they sell some to, let's say, the Netherlands? There is a contract. Yeah, okay. What's the date of arrival? 3 years from now. Well, 3 years from now, and then how do the Dutch get them to Ukraine with the Russians not seeing them? I mean, it's really preposterous. So it's a red herring. It's a canard, and the fact that it was raised by Kellogg, for God's sake, and the vice president. Oh yeah, well, this is under discussion. Well, the way the Russians handle that is, wait a second, our primary focus is to have a good relationship with the United States. Didn't Kellogg get that message? Well, why does he speak in a way at cross purposes of that? That's Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson. So, you had Yerepkov saying this stuff. Oh, the foundations are cracking. But then yesterday you had Ushakov, who's the guy closest to Putin on these matters, saying, look, no, Alaska still going forward. The Europeans are the fly in the ointment on Ukraine. There are other things we have going. And it's true, as Ryabkov said, even though we're talking, we're not making much progress. It's simple to resolve things like the Obama sort of taking ownership of our property, our diplomatic. Oh, here's Ushakov. Yeah, let's see him.
Yeah.
И контакты проводятся как раз на основе тех договоренностей и тех пониманий, которые были
сформулированы. He's speaking in Russian, so it's not really going to help us. But basically, he's saying exactly what you're saying, that the foundations are still there from the Alaska summit, even though progress has been.
So, the foundations are cracking, according to the Deputy Foreign Minister, Ryabkov. But there's some foundations that were built in Alaska, and they're still pursuing them. So this just by way of saying that the Russians have given priority to repairing the relationship with the United States. Ukraine is secondary. When the U.S. strikes Iran with Israel, the Russians say, okay, that's bad, but it's secondary, okay? And you have Ushakov. Now, he was ambassador to the United States. He's been with Putin forever, okay? And they still think that there's some hope to work out an arrangement on Ukraine. Russia is winning. It's just about, it can go all the way to the Dnieper River in the next couple of months without any trouble at all. But, get this. Putin doesn't want to do that. What he wants to do is say, look, let's negotiate. Sure, we have the upper hand, but we're in this for bigger purposes. We want you to recognize our core interests, and that means no Ukraine in NATO. That means a cordon sanitaire where you can't, where no one can violate our territory. And these things were worked out in Istanbul in April of 2022. We got to get back to that. We have Istanbul 2, the fly in the ointment is Zelensky, and these benighted hopes that we could do things like tomahawks. We can't do tomahawks. And as soon as the West European leaders get onto the fact that, hey, this is really a feckless exercise, and as soon as they realize that Putin's not going to be betrayed again by the West, Angela Merkel yesterday says, we fooled them on the Minsk Accords, and we're going to listen to them. And then she said, now the Baltic people, they said, look, don't even talk to the Russians. And so I said, okay. So there's dissension within NATO. There's a worse person in charge of Germany right now. But their social safety net is falling apart. The French government's had their, fourth or fifth prime minister in 1 year. And UK Stormer's popularity is, I think, like 19% today. So these people are going to be falling by the wayside. The big thing here is Putin is patient. He's got the upper hand. He doesn't want any big trouble. And he's working. He's actually kind of, what's the word? He's trying to appease. He's trying to appease Trump by saying, look, no matter what you say, what you do, we still put priority on repairing this relationship. And that's precisely what Ushakov said yesterday. last thing I'll say is, when you study Russian and Soviet history, you study things like Vladimir Lenin, right? And he said, "Revoluция проходит zigzagами." The Russian zigzag, you got it? Okay, so zigzagami is the instrumental case for by zigzags. Okay, so the
Uh-huh.
revolution proceeds by zigzags. Okay, so you say one thing one day, you say another thing the other day to keep people off balance. The Russians are still not above that. You have Ryabkov saying 2 days ago, then you have Ushakov saying, no, everything's. So you got to take this into account. And with respect to Trump, he's not immune from zigzaggery either, but you have to wait 4 days after he says something to see if he reverses himself. So the Russians have to deal with this. He's got the fingers on the codes. And Putin is so perspicacious that these reports that the military or the stronger people in Russia are getting impatient with him, well, I believe them. But when you have an 80% approval rate, I think you can be as relaxed as Putin showed himself to be at Valdai. He may be guilty of hubris, the Greek tragic flaw that felled many a Greek hero. And you don't know that you're guilty of hubris until you're gone. But I doubt that. He seems to be well in control, and we're lucky to have him. For God's sake, God, I hate to think of what we would get if a hardliner came in there, because the Russians have capabilities now that we never have had, and their military is stronger than ours. It pains me to say that. I was in our military. It's the first time that I can say that, because they exceed our capabilities in every realm, including the strategic realm. There's still a balance of terror, but when push comes to shove, they could do things like around the South Pole, for God's sake, or through submarines that we cannot do. So it's a very precarious thing. I just hope that Trump is getting the right scoop on this. What I hear from some of the people advising him, like Kellogg, that the Russians are losing or that their economy is imploding. I don't know where the hell he's getting that stuff, but apparently he repeats it. So it's very, very zigzagamy, if you will.
Can I get two more questions? One has to do with, is it really the Europeans? I mean, Donald Trump always has the ability to walk. And many of the reports that came out pointed out that Europe was terrified that Trump was going to walk, which is why they went with the whole daddy stuff. And sure, we'll accept your tariffs. And basically, we'll take the 10% weapon sales, meaning Europe's economies are burning to the ground. And yet they're still being, let's say, very permissive of pretty much anything that the United States wants, especially in regards to Trump. They seem very submissive. So is it really the Europeans when the United States at the end of the day is the one that has the whip hand in this relationship? Same thing with Zelensky. Trump could say, I'm out. I'm done. Figure it out. But he hasn't said that. And he's stuck with this. And there's some people who honestly believe that the Europeans are just a proxy for the US, that what the Europeans are doing are a way for the US to get some kind of leverage by these kind of provocations of drones, or these kind of provocations of, almost like they're trying to create some kind of false flag situation. Is it really Zelensky and the Europeans, or is the issue Trump?
That's a really good question. One cannot speak of an undivided leadership in Washington. You have the Kellogg's, so you have all these hardliners that work with the Europeans. I mean, Kellogg is in Europe more than he's in Washington, for God's sake, trying to cajole them and all those kind of things. So with respect to Trump and what he wants to do, I think you look to J.D. Vance, and what he said is precisely what you mentioned before. We're done. We're done with Ukraine. He said that 4 weeks ago, okay? We're done with Ukraine. We're not going to put any more money in it. Well, what we're willing to do, this is what we'll do. We'll sell weaponry that way. They got the best weaponry. We're going to sell them to the Europeans. And the Europeans, they buy them, and then they'll give them to the Ukrainians. What's wrong with that? Well, We don't have any weapons to sell and won't for years. Really, we have our own defense needs. We have no weapons to sell. The Europeans have no money to buy those weapons, as you pointed out, Jamal. And the Ukrainian soldiers, there won't be any in another couple of months, you know. So outside of that, it's a great, great plan. I mean, God, how, and Americans just can't, well, that's why I just really enjoy being on your program. This seems very simple to me, just very basic, okay? The Americans realize this. No, no, no. Putin is bad. The Russians are. Last thing I'll say here is that we got into this big fix because of Russiagate.
Right.
Americans have been brainwashed to hate Russia, hate Putin, and no other person than my good friend Jack Matlock, with whom I worked when he was head of the Soviet desk at State, and I was head of the Soviet foreign policy branch at CIA, and who later became ambassador to. What he said just within the last week is, look, the real reason we're in such a fix is because relationship with Russia has been damaged so badly from Russiagate. This made up, manufactured, totally false charges that Russia is responsible for Trump and that, you know, they defeated Hillary and all that kind of stuff. It all depends on how brainwashed the American people are. And if it weren't for people like you, Jamal, and other people I can talk to, and we're gaining strength, I think. We're getting people listening to us who say, well, this is a charade, wasn't it? I hate to say it was a hoax because that was that's what Trump says, right? So, yeah. And I don't want to say hoax, but it was a hoax. Now, does that put me in Putin's pocket? No, it doesn't. It's just reality. So that's the fix we're in. We have to re-educate the American people. Whoa, look, we were taken down a garden path here. There was no Russian intercept, no Russian hacking of the DNC. All that stuff is available in court testimony, sworn testimony, and all that stuff. And it's coming out now, but it's catch-22. Nobody knows about it because the media is suppressing it. We have documentary evidence of what James Comey said or did, and John Brennan and all these other guys. And Tulsi Gabbard has let it out there. But guess what? Most of your audience, I dare say, has not read any of it because it's not been replayed in any adequate way in what we call the mainstream media. Well, mainstream media is going down. We're going up. So let's have a lot of hope that we can prevail here because, as my friend Julian Assange has put it, if wars can be started by lies, they can be ended by truth. Did you have one more question?
START Treaty. So that is supposed to end on February. That cannot be restarted once that ends. There seemed to be no movement on that either. Now, on the positive side,
you're talking about new START now? Yeah,
a new
okay.
START treaty.
I'm with you.
Fortunately, Russia has made the point of saying attack the Tomahawks, and those are two separate issues. So I think that's good.
Yeah, that's a really key point. Yeah, that's what Ryabkov said. I may even have it. Yeah, I do. Ryabkov 2 days ago said, look, quote, Russia does not associate the issue of Tomahawk deliveries to Kiev, which is a canard, as I mentioned before, does not tie that with the New START proposal toward the United States. These are two separate matters, period, end quote. That's really important. Why? Because the first one's a canard, okay, the Tomahawk. The second one is damn real, okay? There's no possibility we can renew the New START treaty, but what the Russians are saying, look, there are strict provisions on the number of offensive missiles that we can have. Let's stick to that for another year and see if we can't negotiate some sort of arrangement where the treaty just doesn't fall apart. Right. It'll end, but the provisions that are important, limiting offensive missiles. If you could sign on to that, that would be really good. Now, what happened? Well, at Valdai, Putin and the rest of them said, well, we're still waiting for an official response on that. It's been almost 3 weeks, if memory serves. Now, is there an unofficial response? Oh, yeah, well, Trump in one of his little interviews with the press, he's asked about this. And yeah, I think it'll be a good idea. Well, isn't that great? Yeah, it'll be a good idea. Well, actually, the Russian guy Kirillov picked up on that and said, "Oh, this is a really good sign. That was a very hopeful sign." So I don't know what they're doing. The good thing is that they are in touch, as the Biden people would not be in touch with the Russians. They are in touch. I think they've been reassured by the business about the Tomahawk, which they realize is a non-issue. And they probably are talking about, look, there's no reason at all why you can't rise to the occasion and at least agree to abide by the provisions limiting the number of offensive missiles under New START. I hope and pray that that happens, because that would be a big thing, and that would allow negotiators such as still exist in the State Department to get together with the Russian opposite numbers and do some serious work on preventing the unleashing of strategic armaments, which is something that will do no good for anybody.
Ray, you are fantastic. You really are. I appreciate you joining me. Thank you for this. Ray McGovern. Ray McGovern is an American political activist with, and former CIA officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990, and in 1980s, chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in preparing the Presidential Daily Brief. Ray, thank you for this. You have a good day.
Jamal. Good luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. We have come to the end. Ray is fantastic. He has my deepest appreciation for joining me. I always appreciate those conversations. I don't know if the audience knows it or recognizes it, but when you talk to people who've been in the machine versus people who've been out of the machine, there's a different take. And I find those takes to be valuable, whether you're talking about Jeff Rich, whether you're talking about Ray McGovern. I'm trying to think of somebody else who was, and John Kiriakou is another one. They have a perspective based on real world phenomena experience of engaging in a system that oftentimes people like me, other people who we may talk to, are seeing externally. And so I always find that's a really interesting tension that gets created. And I always find those points of view to be valuable, very valuable, actually. So Ray has my deepest appreciation for joining me on this. And I thank him for it.